Welcome to another edition of the Chicks on the Right podcast, where we bring on our sponsor and BFF, Zach Abraham, to talk about all things financial. So there's some hullabaloo in the news today, Zach, about the Citigroup chief economist, a fellow by the name of Andrew Hollenhorst, who is echoing something that Jamie Dimon said very recently, which is that things are looking sketch and we are in for a hard landing. So first of all, are they right? And second of all, should we even listen to what Jamie Dimon says? I know everyone consults him all the time, but should we?
Man, I actually know quite a bit on this topic. I wrote a term paper about how Jamie Dimon came to power in college.
No way.
Yeah, he was the understudy of a guy named Sandy Weil, who at the time, in direct violation of a law called Glass-Steagall that was put together right after the Great Depression. Okay, so after the Great Depression, they passed a law called Glass-Steagall, which in retrospect was probably a pretty good law. And it said that different types of banks, so like an insurance investment company and like a commercial bank and a consumer bank, they can't become one entity, right? Keep them split up, kind of spread that risk out. And it's interesting that law was repealed, I want to say in 98, 99. And within 9 years of that law being repealed, you had the financial crisis, right? So without Glass-Steagall being repealed, the financial crisis wouldn't have happened. Anyway, that was done by a guy named Sandy Weil, who was the mentor of Jamie Dimon at Citibank. And at the time, I remember it being big news. And this kind of gives you an insight to where Jamie Dimon came from and what he's about. So at the time, Sandy Weil merged Citibank with Travelers Insurance Group, and it was in direct violation of the Glass-Steagall rule. And so I remember at the time sitting back and going, how can they do this? Well, within 6 months or 7 months, something like that, of them merging it, Glass-Steagall was repealed, right? So they knew, right? They had inside baseball. They knew they were going to get away with it. So I think it kind of gives you insight into Jamie is a political animal. He really knows the ropes. And he's a very, very smart banker too. I think that Jamie Dimon's hard landing message might have some political bend in it, because I think he's probably a guy, he's never going to come out and say this, but I think he's probably more in favor of a Trump presidency than he is a Biden presidency.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, because Dimon's more into personal responsibility. And you can just, when you hear a Wall Street banker go out there and not be woke, you know, you know what I'm saying? Like if they have any of those leanings, they're going to be screaming them from the rooftops, because it's, you know, it gets them invited to more cocktail parties and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think his economic assessment is correct in the sense that, and you always have to caveat that with the government, meaning if they launch any other stimulus or more handouts or something like that, that could really push things off course. But I think when you look at the economy, it's not so much an issue, and we've been talking about this for a while, it's not so much of an issue of a big collapse coming, but when you think about the wind that was put underneath the wings of the economy, right? The greatest monetary handouts in history, $350 billion last year to bail out the banks. You know, the Fed spent what, 2.5, 3 trillion, something like that. I think it's more of an issue of, unless you keep pumping artificial stimulus into this thing, it's going to have to sort of revert to more of a more normal footing. And I think a return to a more normal footing will look more like a hard landing.
So they're right. Mm-hmm.
I think so. And again, I think you have to caveat this with, you know, if Trump gets elected, does he pass another kind of stimulus or tax cut type situation? That could change the calculus. So looking for more, you know, keeping an eye out and assuming that there aren't going to be any more big injections of money or liquidity. It does look like things are heading that way. That being said, the government we're still running $2.2 trillion deficits. So that's going to help buoy things. But I think you're looking at I think what we're seeing right now is kind of a good indicator of what we think is going to be in place for a while, which is look, there are parts of the economy that are absolutely in recession, right? Like you look at Red Lobster, look at the Rubio's taco deal, right? And there's tons of corporate and retail real estate that's just getting flushed out, right? That they're experiencing recessionary, conditions right now. The parts of the economy that are standing in the way or associated with so much of the printed money that's coming down, they look good. So it really is kind of a tale of two cities right now. And barring government intervention, I think some kind of recession is unavoidable. How hard that landing is really all dependent on government intervention, right?
So we gotta brace ourselves.
Yeah, and now the flip side of that is that I think regardless of who gets elected, it's not like Trump is some kind of really tight-pursed, fiscally responsible guy. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So he's going to keep the money flowing either via way of handouts, probably not so much that way, but certainly I would think in tax cuts. So, and I think the other thing we've got to consider too is that I think COVID changed. I think COVID will kind of be seen as like a miniature 0809 in the sense that, 0809, nothing has really returned to normal since then. Yeah. Right. Well, I think COVID's going to be like that to a certain degree, meaning every time there's a recession, I think the populace is going to be looking at the government and going, where's the money? Right. Yeah. Right. I think they've changed the expectations going forward of their constituents in the electorate at large. So, I continue to believe, I think that we need to brace ourselves against shocks because we're definitely prone to those, and could have one at any moment just looking at the way things are laid out. But I think that we always have to remember, we want to guard against those shocks, but when they happen, you probably need to resume investing because, they're not just going to sit back and let things go that way anymore, right? They're just going to keep spending money. It's the easiest thing to do, right?
Well, now I feel like I can actually, whenever I see Jamie Dimon in the headlines, I don't have to go. I don't have to wonder if I'm like getting scammed. So You're saying he's probably somebody that knows what's up.
Yeah, well, he sure is good at running a bank. I'll tell you that much. I think he's, like I said, I think that he's very politically moderate compared to his peers, which I find that somewhat comforting. I think he is more of a free market guy, which I found, but he'll also slit your throat. I mean, he's the head of JP Morgan, right? This isn't a guy that I'd want. I mean, I wouldn't want my grandma to get between him and $100 bill.
Yeah.
Right. I'm not going to trust him with my, I'm not going to trust him with my family. But he is very shrewd and very sharp. The other thing is think about the head of JP Morgan. It doesn't do him any good to be wrong. Right. True. And you think about commercial lending and all that other kind of stuff that they're involved in. It doesn't benefit him if there is a recession, but his bank touches so many parts of the economy. He's not a guy to be just summarily dismissed. If he sees weakness in the economy, he's seeing it, right? He's got credit cards, mortgages, business loans, floating rate business loans. They have a really good picture of what's going on in the economy and
tons of data points.
Yeah. And he's not a guy that should be dismissed for sure.
Well, and neither are you. And so this is why we always tell folks to attend your seminars and to make sure that they're checking out your radio show. Tell people how they can do that.
Yeah, pretty easy to find. So you can just go to any podcast site and you can find our show on our podcast. Just Know Your Risk Radio. It's free, no paywalls. And then go to bulwarkcapitalmanagement.com, knowyourriskradio.com. Just Google that, Know Your Risk Radio. We're pretty easy to find, so it shouldn't be tough.
Thank you so much, Zach.
Thank you, ladies. Zach. Appreciate it.
Investment advisory services offered through Trek Financial LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor. Information presented is for educational purposes only. It should not be considered specific investment advice, does not take into consideration your specific situation, and does not intend to make an offer or solicitation for the sale or purchase of any securities or investment strategies. Investments involve risk and are not guaranteed, and past performance is no guarantee of future results. For specific tax advice on strategy, consult with a qualified tax professional before implementing any strategy discussed herein.